Welcome to the channel, to my review of Codex Tyranids, which is available for pre-order from today. As ever, thanks to Games Workshop for sending this through to me and to other content creators so we can take a look inside and give you our thoughts. Now, I'm not going to give you a full breakdown of what's inside here for a couple of reasons. Games Workshop have changed what they do when it comes to pre-order, pre-release codexes and leak a load of stuff online anyway, so a lot of you out there will know half of the stuff that's in here. And other content creators also do that sort of thing, like break down every single thing that's inside the codex. I'd rather give you thoughts, feedback, things like that. So this is the first 10th edition codex, and from it we can get lots of ideas about what is coming. What do they mean by simplified, not simple? Well, they're halfway there. This book is simplified in half of the respects, but in other places it's really not. There's a lot of unnecessary complexity in this book, which is weird for an edition which is trying to make itself more accessible. So for example, the points values, much more accessible. This is how they did it in the index, and it looks like this is the way it's going to be going for 10th edition. It's basically power levels 2.0, and some people hate it, as in really hate it. But overall, it's been kind of embraced by the community. It does make it a bit more accessible. What I do like about the points value is up here, this little nugget. Basically, it says this is the points value at time of printing. Scan the QR code to get the most updated points values. If you're new to the game, you might not know that the points values in Warhammer 40k are fluid, and this is good. They're keeping it simple. They're keeping it accessible. Just as with the data cards, they're just on one page now, and this is nice, simple, accessible. But then it's arranged in a really weird way, rather than it being entirely alphabetical, which it should be, because you can bring 3 of everything now, except for battle line units up to 6, but you can bring 3 of everything now. Should all just be alphabetical. But we've got kind of like this HQ stuff at the front, not that HQ means anything anymore, and then we've got the troops in the middle, and then it changes alphabetically again to all the remaining stuff. It's built around the skeleton of old editions, like 9th edition and earlier, where force organization actually meant something, where you needed a HQ and troops and things like that, and you don't need that anymore. 10th edition has completely upended the spectrum. You can bring 3 of everything, and this is the way it is now. They found a system in which they can sell more stuff, the rule of 3, so I don't think it's going to go away in any edition anytime soon. I think we might have this from a 10th edition onwards now. Previously, you could only bring 3 Tyrannofexes, because that's 3 heavy slots. But now, because there's no heavy slots, you can bring 3 Tyrannofexes, 3 Trigons, 3 Toxicrenes. Simplified, not simple. And what would make it even more simplified is if this was entirely in alphabetical order. Talking about the data sheets, a couple of them have changed, not very many. So for example, the Tyrannofex here used to reduce all damage by 1, but now you can see once per battle when an attack is allocated to this model, you can change the damage characteristic of that attack to 0. There's very few changes in the data sheets, but there are a couple like that, and I do like this change because I think reducing all damage by 1 is a bit of a broken mechanic. They got rid of -1 damage to Death Guard. They got rid of Transhuman. It's a feels bad mechanic. And having a mechanic in it where all damage is reduced by 1 negatively affects certain armies over others. So for example, Custodes really hate this rule. So changing it to 0 damage once per battle is a good thing. And I hope to see this change in Redemptor Dreadnoughts as well. But I doubt we will, because Space Marines. Anyway, the other thing that we've got in this book is a nice big showcase section. They've actually put a painting thing back in it again. This is nice. But before you get to any of the big data sheets that you might want to sink your teeth into, we have the Combat Patrol rules and different data sheets. Combat Patrol data sheets. So there's 2 of certain data sheets in this book. Just like I feel all the data sheets should be in alphabetical order, I feel like this section here should be in the back of the book. It just keeps things cleaner. Most people will be using this book not to play combat patrols. Anyway, there is now 6 different ways of playing Tyranids. This is the invasion fleet that they released in the index, and it's got rapid regeneration in it, which is probably the best strat for Tyranid players like myself, and none of the other ones have rapid regeneration in. This is the one with sustained hits and lethal hits, which you pick at the start of a battle. We all know what this one does. And then there's 5 more. And my question for you is, Did Tyranids need 6 ways to play? I feel like the Space Marine book needs 6 ways to play. So we have ones for bikes, we have ones for tanks, we have ones for the Space Marines need that, maybe Eldari need that, maybe a couple of codexes need that. But do Tyranids need it? Do Necrons need it? Leagues of Votann? Is there going to be 6 different ways to play in Leagues of Votann? Not all codexes need to be the same because not all factions are born equal. There's a vast range of models that you can get for Space Marines, a very tiny array of models that you can get for the Leagues of Votann. Would it be better to have some codexes that have 6 ways to play or 8 ways to play, a la Space Marines, and some codexes only have 1 or 2? Anyway, what are the detachments other than the invasion fleet? We have the Crusher Stampede, and when big monsters only, are wounded, they get +1 to hit, and when they're half wounded, they get +1 to hit and wound. You can negate this quite easily by just killing the monsters utterly if you're going against it. Then they'll never, this thing will never come into effect if the monster is dead. The enhancements are a bit meh, and I feel like there's some barrel scraping going on. Once per battle, when a psychic attack is allocated to the bearer, it can use this ability. 5 up, feel no pain to psychic attacks. Why couldn't they just change this like to a 5 up, feel no pain, done, once per battle? Anyway, strats. You can auto blow up. You can do a baby tank shock. There's a strat to make shooty bugs shoot better, and a strat to make punchy bugs punch better. I say bugs, but this is all about monsters, and I ask you, would you prefer to have the invasion fleet or these things? Would you prefer to have 6s explode or 6s do lethal hits? Certainly a question. Next, we have Unending Swarm, which basically gets Blood Surge that Khorne Berserkers have. For 2 CP, you can bring a unit back in, a unit of baby bugs. It's like Gene Stealer Cults, but not as good because you have to spend 2 CP on it. You can make baby bugs -1 to hit, or you can make baby bugs hit better, move quicker, or break the blast mechanic. But who's building an army around baby bugs? Seriously, is anyone building an army around baby bugs? Please put it in the comment section below. Do we need this one? Do we need Unending Swarm? Sure, it's cool adding new things in, but by that logic you could add 16 detachments rather than just 6 detachments, because hey, this one is cool, and this one is cool, and this one is cool, and yeah, it's cool having something where Unending Swarms get buffs, but who is building an Unending Swarm list? Anyone? Please write in the comment section below, or anyone that you know is doing a list with 180 models on the table. And 180 models on the table or 100 models on the table is you're just playing on hard mode there. I mean, that's a long day. I play Tyranids. I love Tyranids, and if I add all my Hormagaunts and my Termagants together, I've got way over 100 Endless Multitude modelers, and I don't think I've ever fielded more than 60, maybe. Next, we have Assimilation Swarm, and we get introduced to the notion of Harvester units. What's a Harvester unit? Well, you have to go to all the datasheets and find them all. Pyrovore, the new Pyrovore, that's a Harvester. The Harrowspecs, which are 120 points, is a Steel, that's a Harvester. The Psychophage, not as big and tough as the Harrowspecs, and 5 points more expensive, but it does give out a 6 up, feel no pain, and for that it's worth it. This is a Harvester. And that's it. That's your Harvesters. Now let's break this down. In your command phase, each Harvester unit from your army that is within range of an objective marker you can control can regenerate 1 friendly Tyranid unit that's within 6 inches of it. A unit can only be regenerated once per phase. Each time the following unit regenerates, do one of the following. 1 model in that unit regains up to D3 wounds. 1 destroyed infantry model, excluding characters, is returned to that unit with its full wounds remaining. If that unit is an Endless Multitude unit, up to 3 destroyed models are returned instead. Right, simplified, not simple. Let's break it down. Pyrovores, Harrowspexes, and Psychophages can heal Tyranid units within 6 inches of themselves, so long as they're in range of an objective marker, and they can heal themselves as well because they're in range of their own aura. So if you brought 2 units of Pyrovores and both of them were in range of 1 objective marker, then 1 unit of Pyrovores can do it and give out some healing, and the other unit of Pyrovores could also do it and give out some healing. And because they're infantry, what you could do is put 1 Pyrovore back in. Psychophages, as we know, do the feeling of the pain. They're a very good buffing unit, and having 3 of these sat on 3 or the same objective marker would be particularly useful. But the way to get around it, of course, if you're fighting against it, is just kill the Harvester units. If you kill them dead, then this detachment rule just stops working, unlike the lethal hits or sustained hits shenanigans from the invasion fleet that you got with the index cards. So it feels like a detachment which makes your army tougher. It puts wounds back in, puts models back in, but it's also a detachment that is very easy to counter. And this looks like a nice enhancement. Tyranids model only, not monsters. The bearer's unit can be regenerated up to twice per phase, not once. But all of those harvester units, none of them are characters, so you can't put this enhancement on any of them. This enhancement goes on a Tyranid Prime, or on a Broodlord, or on something that's attached to a unit. And then that character that's attached to a unit needs to be in range of a harvester model, and then that unit can then do it twice. But there's a lot of dominoes here. Once a harvester model is dead, what you do is you play this one, and then until the end of the battle, each time a friendly Tyranids model makes an attack against the enemy unit that destroyed that harvester unit, you add 1 to the wound roll. So Unit X just killed my harvester. Now when I'm fighting against Unit X, I've always got +1 of wound. It's a good strat, but there's a lot of words going on there. 1 CP, give a Tyranid unit lethal hits. Well, you can do that in the invasion fleet thing for free anyway. And if it's a harvester unit, lethal hits go off on a 5. Elevative Carapace, give them a 5-up feel no pain. Psychophage has that anyway. So this is a 5-up feel no pain on your Haruspex or your Pyrovore. It becomes a 4-up feel no pain if they're in range of an objective, which is pretty broken, and it's 2 CP. Rapacious Hunger, regenerate some wounds. Tyrannoformed, great title, love that one. Sticky objectives. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Assimilation Swarm, and it's not intuitive. I can't look at it and think, okay, this is good, this is nice and rounded, or whether this is broken as all hell. Next, Vanguard Onslaught. Tyranids can now fall back and charge, which is good. And Vanguard Invader units can advance and charge and fall back and charge. They can advance and charge because they're Vanguard Invader, and they can fall back and charge because they're also Tyranid units. So what are the Vanguard units? Well, the new Neurolictor is a Vanguard unit, but it's not Synapse. I mean, Neurothropes, Neurogaunts, these are all Synapse. This thing's got a big brain on it. The Norn Emissary, Synapse. This thing, not Synapse. Why? It's also got a really janky rule. Look, select 1 enemy unit within 12 inches of this model. That unit must take a battle shock test. Right, fine. So you're within 12, which means you're getting shot at because a lone operator isn't kicking in. And then it has to take a battle shock test, then assume it fails the battle shock test. Each time a model in that unit makes an attack, subtract 1 from the hit roll, and each time a Tyranid model makes an attack that targets the unit, add 1 to the wound roll. There's a lot of rules going on here for a Neurolictor, which should have Synapse and should have something a lot more simple rather than all of this jank. They're really trying to make battle shock tests be a thing. It's not a thing. Instead, give a Neurolictor Synapse and give it some kind of smite or psychic attack. That's all we need. Anyway, Vanguard units, the Death Leaper, Lictors, Tyrannocytes of all things, and Von Ryan's boy band, and that's it. Those models can advance, fall back and charge. Everything else can fall back and charge. It's like they thought, well, we've got some new models here, so let's build a detachment around it. Just like in the Assimilation Swarm with Pyrovores and Psychophages, let's build a detachment around that as well. What about stratagems? Well, there's some real shenanigans that you can pull off with your Vanguard units. I feel like they're going to be hard to play and hard to master, but if you do master them, some proper shenanigans going on here. For 2 CP, you can move a unit either closer or further away from an enemy unit at the end of their movement phase, potentially making their charges impossible. For 1 CP, at the end of the fight phase, if there are no enemy units within 3 inches of you, you can put them back into strategic reserve. For 1 CP, you can enter play a turn earlier. In turn 1, your Vanguard Invader units can't deep strike those, so they're all going to be entering from strategic reserve on the edges of the board. But 1 Tyranids unit that could potentially deep strike could deep strike in turn 1. In this one, they're trying to make Battle Shock relevant. It's not really. Have you found Battle Shock to be relevant? There's so many ways around it. And here, give Invader units precision hits. I mean, nice, I guess. 1 minute, I found some more Vanguard Invaders. Gargoyles are Vanguard Invaders. And a Winged Hive Tyrant. Sorry guys, simplified, not simple. You're flicking backwards and forwards to find out all this stuff. And the reason why I find that out is because There's a nice 15-point enhancement, Chameleonic, which gives a Vanguard Invader unit stealth, but you can only put enhancements on characters, and I thought the only character out there was the Death Leaper, and the Death Leaper comes with stealth. So Chameleonic basically is only going on a Winged Hive Tyrant because it's the only other epic hero that you can have, but giving it stealth all the time and ignores cover, or the benefit of cover all the time. It's quite a nice one to put on your Winged Hive Tyrant. Anyway, Vanguard Invader units. There's a lot of shenanigans going on in there, and it makes my brain bleed just thinking about it. Now, don't get me wrong, having a detachment where your entire army can fall back and charge is super strong, particularly in an army which has got lots of big bugs in it that can move a long way, that you want to get charging up there, where you want the fight first mechanic, where you want to do as much damage in melee as possible. But only 3 of the stratagems affect any Tyranid unit, and all 6 of them affect Vanguard Invader units. The 3 strats that affect any Tyranid unit are the ones where you can come in from reserve a turn early, the one where you can move away from your opponent if they move within 9 inches of you, and the other one where you can go back in reserves at the end of a fight phase, so long as there's no enemy units within 3 inches of you. There's a lot of redundant strats here for the rest of your Tyranid force. It'd be nice if there was a stratagem which was like 1 CP, fall back and shoot instead of a charge, or 1 CP, advance and charge. I'd love to advance and charge with my Gene Stealers again. You can. Gene Stealers are Vanguard Invader units. Okay, lovely. Gene Stealers can advance and charge. They can fall back and charge. They've made some new Gene Stealer models. Buy your Gene Stealers here. God damn this codex. Finding all the bits and things and flicking through it. And it's simplified, but not simple. Lastly, we're on to Synaptic Nexus, which is a bit like the Space Marine Tactical Assault and Devastator doctrine. You've got 3 abilities that you can pull off once per battle, like Tactical Assault, Devastator, but they're not as good. There is a strat called Imperative Dominance, which in your command phase, even if you've used one of these once per battle things, you can put it on a unit and reuse it. But yeah, Tactical Doctrine in Space Marines, everything can fall back, shoot and charge. In this, it's not everything. You have to be in range of Synaptic Nexuses. So, while you're in range of synapses, 5 up and Vuns. If you bring Neurothropes along anyway, Zoanthropes, you get 6 up and Vun while you're in range of them. Surging Vitality, add 1 to Advance and Charge, is quite nice. Goaded to Slaughter, while you're in Synapse range, each time a model in this unit makes an attack, add 1 to the hit roll. Once per battle, upgrades for your army, gotta be within Synapse range. And this 30-point enhancement is bonkers. Basically, enemy units cannot be set up within 12 inches of the bearer of this enhancement, and when your opponent declares that a unit will arrive on the battlefield from strategic reserves, the bearer can use this enhancement. If it does roll a d6 and a 4-up, it can't arrive on the battlefield this turn. It won't affect deep striking units. This will only affect units coming in from strategic reserves, 50-50 chance of delaying that unit for 1 battle round. Of course, there's a way to mitigate against this, which is if you're playing against it, don't put anything in strategic reserves. But it's a bit bonkers, this one. I like it. Irresistible Will. A lot of dominoes, a lot of complexity here. Why does it have to be so complex? 1 Synapse unit from your army that's not been selected to shoot or fight, and 1 enemy unit within 24 inches invisible to that Synapse unit. Fine, okay. And then until the end of the phase, each time a friendly Tyranids model makes an attack that targets that any unit, if the attacking model unit is within 6 inches of your Synapse unit, reroll a hit roll of 1. So the Synapse unit points at something 24 inches away, up to 24 inches away. Then things within range of that Synapse unit, 6 inches, reroll hit rolls of 1, reroll wound rolls of 1. Simplified, not simple. Why can't it just point at a unit within a certain range, and then Tyranid units that attack that unit reroll hit rolls of 1 and reroll wound rolls of 1? If that's too strong, why can't it point at a unit within 24-inch range and just reroll hit rolls of 1 against that unit for other Tyranid stuff? Particularly when your Synaptic Nexus, your Tactical Assault Devastator, relies on you being in range of Synapse here, there, and everywhere. There's layers. And again, when I'm trying to learn a new edition and new units and what they do, and then I come to stratagems like this, and it makes my brain bleed. Why? Why Games Workshop? Reduce AP by 1 against most Synapse units. Most Synapse units have invulnerable saves anyway. Then there's a strat to allow you to do Tactical Assault and Devastator again. And then finally, we've got 1 good stratagem. Select a Tyranid unit within synapse range. It can fall back, shoot and charge. 1 CP. Nice. Simple. It's easy to pull off. You're going to be using it a lot. And this one is simple to read as well. Finally, one that's simple to read. Synapse units. Zoanthropes. Maleceptors. Tyranid warriors, of course. Not the Neurolictor. Why? Or a Broodlord. Double Y. Then the Swarm Lord, Kevin, and all the Hive Tyrant variants, as well as the Winged Tyranid Prime and the Winged Neuro Tyrant. And no, there aren't any Shrike models in this codex like Winged Tyranid Warriors. When are we going to see them? Games Workshop, please. Then finally, the Norn Emissary at 285 points is an absolute steal, and I made a separate video about this bad boy. So, 10th edition, let's talk about it for a bit. You can take 3 of anything, which is good and bad at the same time. Positive is narratively good. You can bring some narrative lists. You can go bike heavy, tank heavy. It gives you the creative freedom to bring what you want. They're your toys. It's your 40k. Why can't you play with your models however you want to play with your models? The negatives, however, when there were restrictions, and it wasn't just the rule of 3, the game was easier to balance. You couldn't just exploit the elite or heavy slot, for example. You couldn't just bring all the OP things all the time, but now you can. By removing the previous restrictions and just having the rule of 3, this affects how armies scale and the relative difference between lists at either end of the scale. There was a reason why we had restrictions. It could break the game. Just as we have restrictions still, the rule of 3, there is an acknowledgement that the game could break other ways. The rule of 3 goes some way to address this, but not to the extent it did before. Therefore, the scale is off. Therefore, 10th edition. Therefore, if you're having a fight with your opponent and it's a casual game, you really need to discuss beforehand what type of game you want to play. Are you pulling the gloves off, or are you going to have more of a mixed, rounded list going on? But just as you can bring those narrative lovely lists, you can bring lists that don't look like anything from the narrative or don't function like anything from the narrative at all, just exploiting the rule of 3 to its maximum extent if you want to. It's 10th edition. They're going to sell a lot of models. It's here to stay. It'll be here for 11th, 12th and onwards. It's here to stay. So just make sure you have those conversations with your opponent beforehand about what kind of game you're trying to play. I'm repeating myself, sorry. So the NID Codex. There's a lot to love and a lot that makes me go, As a Tyranid player, I don't feel like I need 6 separate detachments, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. I feel like I only need 2. Like that Invasion Fleet is good. Crusher Stampede, good. And then I don't need anything else, personally. There's so much variety in the book. There's so many units now, so many different ways to play them, regardless of the detachments that you bring. There's a lot to explore in here without all of that shenanigans. I think I'll run the Crusher Stampede quite a few times and throw some big monsters at my opponent, because that's always fun. And let's face it, that's why a lot of us Tyranid players play Tyranids, because big monsters. Then, when it comes to the detachments themselves, I love the fact that they're all on one page. That's awesome. But some of these just make my brain bleed. Said that already as well. I wish that they were simplified. Simplified Aurora, even more. There are many strats, many enhancements that rely on X, Y, and then Z happening. Instead, the strats and enhancements could be simplified down to say, do this, get this. It would make the game more accessible for the little Timmies out there and for the people that are terminally stupid like myself, and would encourage me to actually try out some of those different detachments and see what flavours I can pull from them. But right now I'm looking at a chunk of them thinking, that's a lot of rules, that's a lot of things to remember. And half of them I'm not going to pull off anyway, and half of them rely on you getting some of the new models, and it seems like the detachments, some of them at least, are built around encouraging people to buy the new models. Which is fine, which is Games Workshop, which is what they do, I guess. Anyway, that's my Tyranid Codex review. Not sure how this one's going to come out in the edit. Interested to hear your comments below. Big shout out to all my subscribers and channel members for helping support me. Love you guys, and happy wargaming.